The air was filled with the sounds of laughter and anticipation as my friends and I packed our gear for an overnight camping trip. We'd chosen a secluded spot by a river deep in the forests of the Midwest, a place that promised both excellent fishing and an escape from the demands of our everyday lives. Our group consisted of my husband, Tom, our friends, Sam, Mark, and Lisa, and me. As we loaded the truck, my grandmother watched from the porch, her weathered face creased with concern. "You kids be careful out there," she warned, her voice tinged with an unease that made me pause. Strange things have happened in those woods. I brushed off her warning with a smile. "We'll be fine, Grandma. Just a night of fishing and fun." She shook her head, her eyes distant. "There are things in those woods that don't belong in our world." Despite her words, we were determined to go. The drive took us several hours, but the journey was filled with excitement and camaraderie. As we neared the forest, the trees grew denser, their shadows stretching long over the road. The sky was starting to darken, and an unsettling feeling crept into the truck. We noticed a figure walking along the roadside, a frail, elderly man with a cane. Tom slowed down and rolled down the window. "Excuse me, sir, do you know the way to the river?" The old man looked up, his eyes clouded with age and something else, fear. "You kids ought to turn back," he warned. "That place isn't safe, especially at night. Bad things have happened there." His words sent a chill down my spine, but we thanked him and continued on our way. The road grew rougher, and by the time we reached the campsite, the sun had set, leaving us in near darkness. As night fell, we gathered around the campfire, roasting marshmallows and sharing stories. The flickering flames cast eerie shadows, but our laughter kept the darkness at bay. Sam, always the prankster, was telling a particularly tall tale when we heard it, a faint splashing sound from the direction of the river. "Did you hear that?" Lisa whispered, her eyes wide. We all fell silent, straining to listen. The sound grew louder, and then we heard a woman's voice calling out, "Sam, Sam." Sam's face went pale. "That wasn't funny, guys," he said, looking around at us. "We didn't do anything," Mark replied, his voice shaky. The voice called again, more insistent this time. We grabbed our flashlights and hesitantly made our way toward the sound. The river, hidden deep in the woods, was eerily still. The water reflected the moonlight, creating a ghostly glow, but there was no one there. We stood in stunned silence, the eerie quiet of the forest pressing in around us. A cold breeze rustled the leaves, and I felt a shiver run down my spine. "Let's go back to the campfire," Tom suggested, his voice trembling. As we turned to leave, I caught a glimpse of something in the water, a pale face just below the surface, watching us with hollow eyes. I blinked, and it was gone. My heart raced as we hurried back to the safety of the fire. Back at the campsite, the atmosphere had shifted. The cheerful camaraderie was replaced by an unsettling tension. "Let's just stay close to the fire," I suggested, trying to keep my voice steady. "Remember those old stories about salt circles?" Tom nodded, and we quickly gathered salt from our supplies, making a circle around the campfire. It was a desperate attempt to feel safe, but it gave us some comfort. The air grew heavy, and a thick fog began to roll in, obscuring the forest beyond our circle of light. The fog swallowed the trees, leaving us in an eerie, isolated bubble. The only sounds were our own ragged breaths and the crackling of the fire. Then, the woman's voice called out again, but this time it wasn't Sam's name she was calling. "Tom, Tom." The voice was soft and beckoning, coming from the direction of the river. It sent a wave of terror through us. "Tom, come to me," the voice continued, filled with a sorrowful longing. Tom's eyes were wide with fear, his grip tightening on my hand. "Stay in the circle," I whispered urgently. "Don't listen to it." Suddenly, we heard footsteps. They circled our camp, crunching the fallen leaves and twigs underfoot. The sound was so close it felt like someone was just outside the salt circle, watching us. "Who's there?" Mark shouted, his voice breaking the tense silence. There was no answer, just the steady, menacing pace of the footsteps. We sat frozen, unable to move, our eyes darting around the fog-shrouded perimeter. Every instinct screamed at us to run, but we were paralyzed with fear. Suddenly, we heard a loud splash from the river. The footsteps stopped, and the fog began to lift, slowly revealing the familiar surroundings of the campsite. We stayed in our circle until dawn, afraid to move. As soon as the first light of morning broke through the trees, we packed up and left the campsite as quickly as we could. The experience had left us shaken, and the drive back was filled with a tense silence. Once home, I went straight to my grandmother and recounted the night's events. She listened quietly, her face growing grimmer with each word. When I finished, she sighed deeply. That river you mentioned, it has a dark history. She told us a story from her youth, about a young couple named Cynthia and Clark who had been caught by a bear near that very spot. Clark had fought bravely to protect Cynthia, but had been killed. Distraught and lost, Cynthia had drowned in the river, her spirit forever bound to the place where she lost her love. You shouldn't have gone there, she said, her voice trembling. Those woods are cursed. Cynthia's spirit still roams, searching for her lost love. Every time we gathered, especially at night, the memory of that camping trip would resurface, casting a shadow over our reunions. None of us ever returned to that campsite, and we always made sure to return home before nightfall, forever marked by the chilling events of that fateful night.